Councillor Connolly.
Minister, the Parliamentary Budget Office prepared a paper for us, and in that paper they said it has to be acknowledged that the political cycle provides little incentive to plan for medium or long-term needs, and they acknowledge that, and that each government is driven by short-term needs. However, notwithstanding that acknowledgement, the continuation of that approach by this government is particularly shocking, particularly worrying and unacceptable given the challenges that we face. It is now 75 years since we made that wonderful declaration that we were a republic, which obviously is a work in progress. And we have a budget, for the first time, a surreal surplus of 25 billion, including 14.1 billion from the Apple case that she struggled gallantly not to take. And that gives us the ability and enables us to make the Republic a reality in the real sense of what a republic means. The background to this budget that makes absolute necessary transformative action, of course, is we declared a climate and biodiversity emergency in May 2019. Remember previous budget speeches where the Taoiseach, the former Taoiseach, and various ministers told us the world was burning. All of that type of language is now gone, which is interesting in itself. But we declared the emergency, and then we had the COVID pandemic. Both absolutely requiring transformative action, not a sign of that. And then we have the Housing Commission report earlier this year, never discussed in at all. And while I have a minute or two, I'm going to place on the record what they said. Housing must be a unique national priority, supporting social cohesion and economic development. The problems with housing have arisen due to the failure to successfully treat housing as a critical social and economic priority, evident in the lack of consistency in housing policy. Inconsistency undermines confidence. A consequence of these policy failures is that Ireland has, by comparison with our European partners, one of the highest levels of public expenditure in housing, yet one of the poorest outcomes. Only a radical reset of housing policy will work. Did we get that in this budget, Minister? Absolutely not. What we've continued to do is to put our head in the sands, to renew the Help to Buy scheme, which is pushing the prices of houses extraordinarily high, and no increase in targets at the most minimum requirements that we should be looking at. Housing, the amount of people in homeless really has just been normalised. We now have 14,488 children. Now, any sensible government would say that's a policy failure. 14,486, including 4,316 children. More than 50% of renters need help from the state to rent, while rent continues to rise at 2.5 times the European average. When I mention homelessness of 14,000 plus, I'm not mentioning the hidden homelessness. Now, surely that's an indictment of a republic, that we would think we're successful with our housing policies, even though the commission that you set up is clearly telling us. And then to tell us the Help to Buy scheme is going to be extended is an absolute mockery. That we would need to give government help to consultants and those earning salaries like that, or indeed TDs, to help to buy a house is totally unacceptable. I repeat the word mockery. If we were truly interested in being a republic or working towards a republic, one of the most basic things that we would have introduced in this budget was a cost of disability payment. I welcome the various increases that have been given on social welfare, and I might come back to that because they're not being benchmarked or not being placed in the context. But the one thing that would make a difference, a cost of disability payment, completely ignored. The abolition of the means testing for carers, still there. Even though we went to the trouble of having a referendum to tell the people that we thought they were wonderful, minding people who needed care, and that this government was there for them, and yet we keep a means test. And at this point in time, we're awaiting the judgment from a Supreme Court case where the mother was forced to go to the Supreme Court, work the whole way up. And such is the importance of that case that the Supreme Court took charge of it, as I understand it, and we're waiting on that. I myself I worry that it mightn't be the ideal case to test what's been tested. Nevertheless, it's worth reading the judgment to date of the previous court and what is said about the burden that that mother has to bear. And then we look at infrastructure. Let me briefly mention in direct provision, because I heard comments today in relation to direct provision, and your policy in relation to that, as distinct from your policy with people from the Ukraine, is absolutely wrong. You have used a divide and conquer mechanism. So some people coming to our country are good and others aren't. We decided a long time ago that direct provision was not acceptable. When I say we, the Day report in 2020, the white paper from the government ending direct provision 2021, and to go down the road for not-for-profit centres. That hasn't happened, Minister. And not alone has it not happened, but we have the Taoiseach of the country telling us that they're causing the homeless problem, or they're part of the homeless problem. It's shocking. Divisive politics that's absolutely unacceptable. And I'm sure you don't agree with that, and I'd love to hear your voice on it. And as we talk about that, 6,500 individuals are still in indirect provision, although they have the status and they can't get out. And yesterday I was in contact with the Minister for Children again, because somebody is now living in a car, having been thrown out of the direct provision in Galway to make room for other people. That's how cracked the policy is at the moment. That person is working full-time, 12-hour shifts, living in a car, and the answer from the Minister is the letter they got: go to Dublin and get emergency accommodation in Dublin, leave your job, and so on, and then we castigate them for not wanting to work. In relation to indigenous industries, I despair with this budget. Hasn't even begun to look at the importance of indigenous industries, even though you've been warned by every organisation that deals with fiscal rectitude and so on to say we're relying on a small quota of foreign direct investment. We need to broaden our tax base, we need to put incentives into indigenous industries, and we need to look after small to medium enterprises. None of that happening at all. I think of seaweed, I think of wool, I think of fishermen on the coastal areas that haven't been mentioned, who are still waiting on a policy in relation to sustainability for Sprat and stopping the big boats going in there. Finally, I'll finish on my last minute and a half in relation to infrastructure. I welcome that you're mentioning infrastructure, mentioning it. There is no plan, there is no pathway, and I come from a city where the infrastructure is collapsing in relation to sewage treatment plant. We have a plant that's functioning very well. It's the collection, the pipes. One of them is in imminent danger of collapse, and I quoted all that last week. So we cannot have balanced regional development. We can't have balanced development within a city and county without a sewage treatment plant in Carrow. None of that is happening. If you're finally taking a step, I welcome that. And finally, in the two speeches given today, not one single mention of homeless, of people homeless. 14,480, not mentioned. And we have a minister talking about hope, and it's important to give hope. The best way to give hope is to give shelter, a basic human right, a home. That's the best way to give hope, or at least to give a pathway to that, knowing that you realise your policy is wrong and needs to be changed. So not hope I'm taking out of today, but hopeless maybe. Thank
you, Deputy.